Night in the Woods is full of unseen characters who never appear on screen, but make their presence felt nonetheless. Some are lore-based, like Andy Cullen, the victim of the killer incident, or Ed Scudder, who discovered the black goat. Others, however, have a more tangible influence, a distant but noteworthy impact on the events of the game. And something that 3 of these unseen characters have in common is that we have reason to believe that they might be members of the cult of the Black Goat. These characters are Dan McConnell, Creek, and Dr. Hank, brought to life for the first time by the incredible Jordi, Jaen, Moreno. Let's take a look at these 3 characters and see what connections to the cult we can find. But before I continue, if you are a Night in the Woods fan, then please be sure to like, subscribe, and consider supporting me on Patreon or through a YouTube channel membership. My dream is to make these videos full-time someday, and by doing any of those things, you'll be helping make that a reality. First up, let's talk about Dan McConnell. He, like Aunt Molly, is a member of the Possum Springs Police Department. It doesn't appear that the Possum Springs PD has a large enough force for officers to have partners, but he seems to be the closest thing Molly has to one. The day after Harfest, when May reports the kidnapping she witnessed the night before, it's Dan McConnell who searches the woods with Molly. And when May passes out in the woods after her first encounter with the cult, it's said that it was Aunt Molly and another cop who found her and brought her home. Considering that there aren't any other named cops in the game, and Dan McConnell searched the woods with Molly once already, it's logical to assume that the other cop mentioned here was him. Naturally, Dan McConnell being involved in these 2 incidents, the search for Ide that bore no fruit and fishing May out of the woods, makes him a key candidate for speculation about being a member of the cult. As I discussed at length in my video on Molly, she's no Dick Mullen, no human can opener, no super sleuth. Her mall cop nickname is well-deserved. She's got more in common with Paul Blart than she does Harry Dubois. So while she was checking out the woods with Dan McConnell, I wouldn't be surprised if he volunteered to check out all the suspicious areas, like the mine where the cult has their little group therapy sessions, for example, while sending her to places where he knew she wouldn't find anything noteworthy, like the portion of woods with the 2 teenagers on the mattress. It's easy for me to imagine Dan McConnell saying something along the lines of, hey Ma, how about you go over there and go check out the woods, and I'll go check out this here mine. And then we'll go get some Donut Wolf and get the Smelters game, okay? And unfortunately, it's easy for me to imagine Molly buying this hook, line, and sinker. This would allow Dan to keep up the appearance of investigating the kidnapping, while in truth, he was covering for the cult all along. We can apply this same logic to fishing May out of the woods. It's no wonder he and Molly were able to find her. If he's in the cult, then he would have known exactly where she fell the night before. I'll bet he led Molly right to May, and that the Paul Blart of Possum Springs didn't think anything of it. As the cult makes clear during their final conversation with May, they consider what happened during their initial encounter with May to be a mistake. Remember, they want her to join them, to make use of her connection to the Black Goat, the Glimmer. They don't want to kill her, which they damn near did by shooting at her. By helping Molly find May and bring her back home, Dan is helping cover for this mistake. A mistake that I suspect he's responsible for making in the first place. The shot that the cult takes at May is one of the more overlooked aspects of Night in the Woods. A lot goes down in the final act, so it's easy to forget that one of the cult members tries to murk her with a hunting rifle when she's about to get away. Again, this wasn't something they planned to do. It was a last-second decision they made out of desperation. It would be so on brand for a cop, given the incompetent way they're portrayed in the game, to do something like this. To ignore the intentions of his superiors, pick up a rifle, and start blasting. It also helps explain the timeline of events with regards to the cult. As I mentioned way back in my video on Aunt Molly, she tells May about the results of the testing they did on the severed arm on day 11, and later that night, the cult executes Lerv for leaving it in front of the click-clack. So either it took the cult nearly 2 weeks to learn about Lerv's mistake, or they didn't act until it was confirmed that the severed arm came from one of their recent victims. Only someone with access to the police department could have discovered this, and since we know it wasn't Molly, we can safely assume that it must have been Dan McConnell. As I see it, the whole order of things probably went down like this. Molly brought the arm in for testing, but didn't tell Dan McConnell about it until the test results came back. At that point, Dan McConnell realized that the arm had come from someone they'd sacrificed to the Black Goat, and called up his cult buddies to take care of the situation. Then, that night, they abducted Lerv the same way they'd do with their victims, and brought him back to the mines so they could finish him off. In light of all this, the idea of Dan McConnell as a cult member really makes sense to me. It would also help explain why so many of the cult's victims, like Casey, are able to go missing without a trace, and why the Possum Springs Police Department is never able to pick up on any leads on their disappearances. Because it's an inside job. They've got a police officer working for them, covering their tracks and making sure that the truth about the cult stays hidden. Next up, let's take a look at Dr. Hank. Dr. Hank is mentioned by several characters throughout the game, including May, Bee, Greg, and Selmers. It's no surprise that so many characters are familiar with him, because he's the only doctor in all of Possum Springs. Though, to say that is actually selling things a bit short. He's not just the town's only doctor, he's its only medical professional. As a result, he's stepped up to become a one-stop shop for just about any health impairment the citizens of Possum Springs might be faced with. He's a family doctor, a dentist, and a therapist. A jack of all trades, if you will. But a jack of all trades is, inevitably, a master of none, and I can think of nothing worse than someone pretending to be an authority in fields like dentistry and therapy when they really don't know anything about teeth or diagnosing mental illnesses. No matter how you slice it, this is, frankly, a dangerous approach to medicine, something that many of the characters reference when talking about him. Greg mentions that Dr. Hank messed up one of his fillings, while B comments that he has no business getting involved in mental health and should instead stick to standard medicine. Even May and Selmers note that the journals he provided them with aren't really improving their mental health in any noticeable way. Sure, you could make the argument that the services he's providing are better than nothing, but that's just not the way things work in the medical field. What he's doing here in Possum Springs is deeply unethical. Dr. Hank is a fraud, a quack. But despite his professional failings, Dr. Hank would be an incredibly valuable asset to the cult. He has access to everyone in the town, along with their medical history and mental health records. He would know, better than anyone, which people would make good candidates for sacrifice. He'd know who wasn't contributing to the town, who's doing drugs, and who won't be missed. It is truly a perfect job for a cult member. It would also help explain why he's been able to operate as the town's quack doctor for so long. Even if he's the only gig in town, you'd think that someone would get tired of his act eventually. But as a member, he's got the cult's support, and in all likelihood, they probably kept him safe from any and all accusations, lest they lose their best informant. For all of these reasons, it just makes sense for Dr. Hank to be a cult member. There's a lot we don't know about him, and he has little impact on the story itself, but the information we do have certainly points to him being one of the murderous uncles. And finally, let's talk about Creek. Creek is only mentioned in one segment, during the hangout at Bee's house. He works for Mr. Santello at the Old Pickaxe, where he serves as a member of the repair crew. Bee explains that when she was old enough to get behind the wheel of a car, Creek offered to teach her how to drive, at which point Mr. Santello warned Bee never to be alone with him. The implication here is clear. Creek is a creepy old man who can't be trusted around young women. In all likelihood, there have either been rumors or allegations against him in the past that Mr. Santello is aware of. Despite this, Bee doesn't have the authority to fire him, and in her words, couldn't afford to get rid of him even if she wanted to. She says that he's a good worker, and that he has a family he needs to take care of. It's another example of Bee's profound empathy, as she's looking out for the best interests of someone who is probably a really terrible person. But in any case, the fact that we can readily conclude that Creek is a bad person has caused some to speculate that he might be a member of the cult. I find this to be a strong possibility, especially when you consider the fact that Creek is likely his last name. And although we don't know his first name, we do know a few of the cult members' first names. Before he's executed, Lerv calls out to 3 members, Dave, Rick, and Benny. As I concluded on my video on May's neighbors, there's a good possibility that Rick is Mr. Twigmeyer, leaving us to speculate about the true identities of Dave and Benny. Dave is responsible for holding Lerv down while Rick finishes him off, which is a horrible thing to do, but something that someone like Creek might be willing to go through with, given what Mr. Santello says about him. That having been said, while we only know so much about all 3 of these characters, we know the least, by far, about Creek. Dan McConnell and Dr. Hank are mentioned multiple times. Creek only comes up in one scene. So while I do like this theory, I have to say that I think his status as a cult member belongs in the inconclusive category. He's definitely a suspected member for good reason, but we just don't know enough about him to brand him as one. He might just be a skeevy old man. There are, unfortunately, plenty of those around, and not all of them are down with the murder cult. So, in summary, I think there's a strong possibility that Dan McConnell, a police officer and the closest thing Aunt Molly has to a partner, and Dr. Hank, the only doctor in all of Possum Springs, are cult members. Creek might be one too, but it's hard to say without more information. What's interesting to me is that if this is true, then it suggests that the cult deliberately sought out pillars of the community, like law enforcement and medical professionals, to join their ranks. Paragons of Possum Springs, who would give their group legitimacy, provide them with a wealth of information, and help ensure that their vile activities remained a secret. Over the last few months, we've done our best to identify the nameless, faceless members of the cult of the Black Goat. Next time we speculate about the cult, we'll be taking the opposite approach, as we try to unravel the mystery behind the cult's most important member, Ide. So join me next time as we speculate about the identity and the purpose of this mysterious character. Thanks for watching. Massive shout out to Jordi, Jaen, Moreno for bringing the characters of Dan McConnell, Dr. Hank, and Creek to life through his incredible artistic talent. Folks, I can't praise Jordi enough. He's amazing, and it's a true honor to work with him. If you're in the market for any kind of Night in the Woods fan art, be sure to get in touch with him. Huge thanks to Wolf.Godwin for continuing to allow me to use their Night in the Woods covers for these videos, and to my Silver Tier YouTube channel members, including James Pruitt, who get early access to these videos with donations of $5 a month. Next week, I won't be posting a new video. Instead, on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, in honor of Halloween, I'll be doing a live playthrough of the Harfest segment from Night in the Woods. This will be the first, what I hope will become a holiday tradition of live streams here on the channel. I love getting together with you folks to talk about this awesome game at the premieres, so think of these live playthroughs as an extension of that. Really hope to see you there. Until then, take care. See you guys next time.